Hi there, good evening. This is a beautiful full moon eve and I've just come in out of the rain because the setting sun, the late evening sun and the rain happened and I realized I was going to get a rainbow. So my notes are all dripped upon and I have beautiful rainbows pictures which I will show later. All right, I am here with the Dark Goddess Astrology reading for the full moon, which is tomorrow at 2:37 p.m. That's where I live, on the coast of Maine, Eastern Time. The sun is in Cancer and the moon is in Capricorn. And I'm going to show you what's going on in the chart. All of this, and that's a lot. And I looked at that and I asked for the planets to tell me what is the message that needs to come through me. Because there are many astrologers out there who will give you much wisdom, all of it. Well, I don't know about all of it, but the people that I follow, I feel give me good information and insights that I don't necessarily see for myself. So my work is to give you insights that very likely no one else will give you. So there is a story to be told at this full moon happening now. The window, the portal is open at the full moon tomorrow. And this story is actually now, and then part two, the same story with a little bit of different energy, is still going to be happening at the new moon in 2 weeks. So pay attention to what I tell you now, because we're going to have more of the story in a couple of weeks. So just taking a quick look here, we have sun, moon, and Psyche. And there is a conjunction here, very close, in conjunction with the sun. There is Mercury and Lilith asteroid. And Black Moon Lilith is off. She's influential, but she's holding space. She's not really active in today's story. And then this is coming down. We have the sun, Lilith asteroid, and Mercury connected to Psyche in Virgo, opposite. The exact opposition is the point between Nessus and Juno. So Juno is in a sextile to the moon and a trine to the sun. So Juno is connecting and flowing and receiving energy and giving energy to both the sun and the moon. And so this seems to be the story that the Dark Goddess wants us to know, because it is incredibly relevant to what's going on in the world right now. So it is my intention, my hope, to be clear and concise, and so I have notes here, if I can read them through the raindrops. So let me introduce to you the players in this story. There is Juno opposite Psyche. And this has been going on for a while, and it's going to continue at least through the new moon. And then after that, it's going to begin to shift, I think. But yes, it will shift. And Juno is in an effective conjunction with Neptune. Now, before she can completely merge her energy with Neptune, she's going to turn retrograde on July 26, 2 days before the new moon. And that is going to enter into the story a little bit later. I I bring up Neptune because Neptune is very much, Neptune has a wide orb. He kind of sweeps up a lot that's in his area. So he's trying the full moon, the sun, and sextile the moon, just like Juno is, and he's reaching it and scooping up Juno and connecting to Ceres. But Neptune is at home in Pisces, modern ruler, and he represents, on the shadow side, illusion and delusion and obfuscation and not being able to see clearly and confusion and lies and dissembling. But on the positive side, he represents the visionary, the creative imagination, and also the veils between what we believe, what we think we know, what we may have been taught, and what is true. And when I think of the veils, I think of veils of perception, of reality, veils of consciousness, veils of awareness. And so Neptune has that space of revelation. And whatever it is that we need to do to interact with those veils and shift our consciousness. And that's very much a part of this story and what we will be working on, the rest of the year, to be honest. Juno probably bears her own session of conversation. She's been asking for it for a while, but I'm going to stay focused on the story that's happening at the full moon. So Neptune is a player. Juno is the queen of the gods, the wife of Jupiter, and she has her dark side and her light side. So we'll talk about both of those. Lilith, in Cancer, conjunct Mercury, she represents the feminine wound, the disowned feminine within, and she represents our shadow self, that part of ourselves that we have rejected and refused to acknowledge because we learned it was bad. And I will be sharing more of that as the story goes on. And then Psyche. Psyche is the maiden to Juno's woman. Psyche is the hapless maiden who didn't know her own mind, who followed all the bad advice that other people gave her, and they were being kind of manipulative. And she ultimately lost everything. Well, not ultimately, because that was not the end of her story. So these are the characters. So let's talk about them. Let's see. Okay, we got another player. The Lilith asteroid and Mercury conjunction is in a singing close harmony to Uranus, which means in this new moon, you can, full moon into the new moon cycle, you can anticipate an epiphany. Uranus represents things changing very quickly, things coming out of the blue, lightning bolts. And there's a spiritual aspect to this that shows up as sudden insight. And relating to Neptune and the veil gets pulled away. So it is my hope that I will help begin that process for you with this story. Let's see, where do I want to go with this? Okay, what we're going to set up. let's look at the shadows, because we're actually familiar with the shadows. We've been living in them. That the shadows are the stories told by patriarchy about women, and it is what patriarchy wants us to believe about ourselves, because when we are in these negative aspects of the feminine, these dysfunctional, that's really more what I want to say, dysfunctional, it's not working, it's, we are at their mercy. We are able to be controlled, and we will believe what they tell us. So, Psyche at 18 Virgo is the hapless maiden who, she was actually in a secret marriage with Cupid, Venus's son, and she could not trust the situation she was in. And she also made an enemy of Venus, because Venus did not choose her as a daughter-in-law. She didn't like her. Venus was Cupid's mother. And Psyche listened to the advice of all the voices around her saying, oh, you're an idiot. And so she listened to them, did what she said, and lost everything. But that is not the end of the story. She actually had Venus trying to kill her by having her do impossible tasks, and upon her failure, she would die. Okay, so this is the maiden who doesn't know her own mind, who does not trust herself, who kind of sees monsters and boogeymen in every situation, and the people around her are emphasizing that and approving of that. So this is where Psyche is. She stands, in astrology, some people say she stands for the wound we believe we cannot heal. I am fucked up and I can't fix it. That's Psyche. But that's not all. We'll get to the second part in a minute. She is opposite Juno, which is the woman, the enraged woman, the enraged wife. Juno stands for, in her shadow side, she stands for jealousy, revenge, rage at her husband. She was married to Jupiter, who treated her badly, abused her, kept her, tied her up in a chastity belt, and then refused to have sex with her, refused to give her children, and went off and had sex and raped and seduced and whatever he wanted to, every other goddess, demigoddess, nymph, naiad, and human mortal he could find, and had children with them. And therefore, Juno represents that rage that women feel and that anger that we feel towards other women. It represents self-hatred, because we turn that in on ourselves, because we hate ourselves for feeling like this. Jealousy is one of the most painful emotions that there is, probably second only to shame. And they go hand in hand. And that rage that is impotent, that, her sex was locked up, literally, that is impotence. Her procreation, her fertility, locked up. And that's not how it started. That's not what was meant to be. But they got into this battle, this power struggle. And this is how it came out. And that is what patriarchy wants women to feel about ourselves, to hate and despise ourselves, and then project that onto other women as jealousy, as contempt, as revenge, as backbiting and catfighting, and all sorts of absolutely disgusting and disempowering and dysfunctional relationships and emotions. We become tools of patriarchy when we live like that. We look to where we can get our power from the masculine, from the male, and we either become as men walking out into the world, or we do their bidding and derive our power from them. So that's the dark side of Juno, the part that is broken and dysfunctional. And these two are connecting to Lilith asteroid, which is the personal Lilith. There are 3 Liliths, and they all have different meanings, that the different octaves of Lilith. And this is the internal octave of Lilith, the basically the feminine wound, which has been described as that moment when we're born and they realize that we're female and we don't have a penis. We immediately are told, energetically taught, socialized, and verbally reinforced over and over again throughout our lives, you are not as good as a man. You are less than. You are underneath the man. And the feminine power that is inherent in your vulva and your womb and your cosmic connection to life itself, you've got to do what men say. It's not yours, and it's inferior, and you don't know how to handle it, and you don't know what to do with it, and you can't be trusted with it, and there's something wrong with you, and you may not even understand what it is, but we're going to tell you over and over again that there's something wrong with you. Okay, that is Lilith asteroid, disowned. And so what do we do with that kind of pain? Disown it. Yes, it goes away. It's not true. And so we can become cut off from our power, our intuition, our inner knowing, our deep wisdom. And at some point we may tune in and respond to life as Psyche does, and because we go through these stages back and forth, we become like Juno, and we have the power of the queen and the authority of the queen, but it is truncated and limited by the masculine imposing its will and not honoring us and adoring us and lifting us up in the power. So this is where we are. And when you look at what's going on in society, you can see the evidence and the gleefulness at which patriarchy and the state are reasserting themselves. And this is happening all over the world in all kinds of ways. But we know some of the premier examples are happening right here in the United States. So what do we do about that? Well, it's time for a change. You've heard me say before that the challenge before us is to remember and begin to live as if we remembered what it's like to be a woman before patriarchy. And that is a profound act of creative imagination. And I also have come to recognize just in the last few hours that it is a shift of consciousness, which is itself an act of creative imagination. So recognizing that creative imagination, imagining, well, what would life be like if God was a woman and women knew what it was like to live in this body and have this power before patriarchy told us that we were Lilith or we were Psyche or we were Juno. And so that's where we call upon Uranus, Neptune, and another player, Nessus. Juno recently the last couple of moon cycles, has made a transit of Nessus, a conjunction, and moved beyond Nessus. Still very close, 5 degrees separate them. But in a week, Juno is turning retrograde, and she is going to go back through Pisces, which is an incredibly spiritual sign. So this is a spiritual shift of consciousness, grounded in spiritual truth, divine energy. She's going backwards through Pisces to transit conjunct Nessus again, and then she will go forward and meet him yet a third time. So this is happening throughout the rest of this year. Juno will turn direct on October 23rd, 2 days before the next solar eclipse. And then she will make her way towards Nessus, and I didn't look up that date, but that's coming down the pike. We're looking at a solid 6 months, I believe, of this Juno Nessus energy. Nessus stands for ancestral healing of ancient traumas, especially related to sexuality, sexual abuse, harassment, rape, and the aftermath thereof. And honestly, conservative religion and what the laws and the theocracy is attempting to do is a form of sex abuse to an entire population. So Juno is going into Nessus, which means digging into some darkness, working with ancient traumas that may or may not have happened in your lifetime, but it is happening in our lifetime because the state is providing the trauma right now. And so how are we going to be with this? Well, we're going to tap into the powerful Juno, and we're going to go back and connect with Nessus, and we're going to do the work that needs to be done. And we're going to connect with the powerful, the disowned Lilith. What happens when you acknowledge Lilith and stop disowning her? Stop saying she's bad, she's awful, she's less than, she's not good enough, she's never enough. She immediately, she steps up and shows you all of her power. Now, if we're not used to that power, that can be a scary thing. So this is something we work with. And then once again, we're going to go to Psyche, and we're going to look at the rest of her story. What happens to that maiden? So this full moon is a portal for entering this story of initiation, of reclaiming of power, of integrating the power, owning what has been disowned and integrating. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that looks like, just briefly. We have a lot of helpers. All the other goddess planets that I read are active and are working on this and are communicating with each other. They'll come into the story more at new moon, so I'm not going to name them, but no, they're all working to help if you are allowing yourself to have this breakthrough moment at the moment of full moon. So let me read my wet notes here. Okay. So here's what happened to Psyche. She's in Virgo, the sign of the priestess now. So for those of you who carry priestess energy, there is a healing, and we all have Virgo somewhere in our chart. There is a healing of the priestess going on because this is happening in Virgo, and there's This has been going on for a while because Psyche's been in Virgo for a long time. She did retrograde in Virgo, and now she's heading out, moving towards Libra. So what happened? Venus tried to destroy Psyche because she did not want her for a daughter-in-law. She did not choose her to marry her son, Cupid. And what happened through those trials is that Psyche began to listen to her intuition and receive help from wherever it came from. Nature, flowers, ants, her connection to herself. With these all represent aspects of her inner knowing, and she was able to complete 3 impossible tasks successfully. And Venus got more and more angry, but she had to accept it because her integrity required that she acknowledge the success of Psyche. And ultimately, the last task had to do with receiving the compact, the beauty ointment of Venus. And she was not to open it, but of course Psyche did. And she put it on and became as the goddess. And she was able to marry Cupid in the light of day and give birth to their children and become part of the household of the goddess. So this is a story of a maiden initiation from I don't know anything, everything I do is wrong, to I can actually trust myself. I have survived hard things, and I've actually been accepted into the family of the divine feminine. So that is the energy that we can begin to activate when we choose. And across from that is the older woman energy, who also goes through, Juno's story is a story of women's initiation as well. She started out as the beautiful, erotically charged maiden that attracted Jupiter's attention in the first place. And he married her and set her on the throne and then said, okay, I've got you, I'm going to keep you. And he did all the things that I've already described. Well, Juno, after eons, because they're immortal, of living as this jealous, vengeful, enraged, outraged woman, abused, and seeing other women being abused in a similar way, and feeling impotent, she became incredibly disgusted with the state of her life and her whole role in it. And she took herself on retreat. She left. And this is a theme that happens. Lilith in the garden abandoned the garden rather than submit. And there's something to be said. That's kind of a new thought that has popped in, that we have to take ourselves out of the situation and go on retreat and remember. So for Juno, it was remembering, who was I? When this story started, I was not who I am now. Who was I then? And so she remembered her feminine power, her initiation. I believe she was initiated into the Elysian mysteries. I seem to remember that in one story. I could be wrong, but she knew who she was. She knew her power. And things went wrong somewhere. She allowed herself to forget. And so she remembers, and she remembers, and she remembers, and she roots, and she gets into her body and her knowing and her wisdom, and she taps into the crone energy, and she somehow comes full circle to, she has all of the phases, the maiden, the woman, and the crone. And she comes into her wholeness, and she's ready to return and reclaim her throne on Olympus. And she doesn't go in and lay down the law to anybody or present anyone with ultimatums. She just takes her throne, and she's grounded in her power. And Jupiter looks at her and says, oh my God, that's the goddess I married. And so we see Juno in her power, standing for the cycle of women's initiation, maiden, woman, and crone, and returning to that, because we are all of that, all the time. And that is that connection to our earth, our erotic power, our inner knowing that rises up and radiates out. And so she connected with her husband again and became that marriage of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine. And so she represents the sacred marriage, which happens in here first, and then it can happen with our beloved. And then she stands for the women who are abused as she was. And so she stands for justice for women and their children. And when I tune into Juno, I hear her saying to me, this is the value that society is built on. What gives life to the women? What supports the women and their power? And what supports them to birth their children, to raise their children, feed and clothe their children? And the indigenous people the world over recognize this too, 7 generations forward. We are stewards for who is coming. We are not consumers of everything we can get our hands on right now. So Juno reminds us of that. And as Juno is going back and forth over Nessus, even as Pluto in Capricorn is returning to its birthplace, at the place it was at when the Declaration of Independence was signed, this nation was born. Something's got to give. So now let us go to Lilith, and we will complete here. Asteroid Lilith. When we allow ourselves, when we wake up to the truth, pull back the veil, have that lightning bolt strike, the breakthrough moment of, I have been suppressing my own feminine and collaborating with my own repression, believing what I have been told all this time. I claim Lilith. I claim my divine feminine. I claim the healing of that old wound. I will not allow that to define me anymore. I step into my power. When we have that breakthrough, Lilith emerges. She blossoms. It's like she was hidden inside and she comes out, and we embody her. She infuses us with everything that she stands for, which is feminine power, the power of the goddess who is connected to the divine and the earth, fertility, sexuality, sensuality, the beauty of the garden that she has always associated with cross-culturally, the wisdom of the serpent, the renewal and rebirth that the serpent represents, shedding of skin and transformation. Now, at this full moon, you can have a breakthrough. Lightning can strike you. The moonbeams can hit your eyes, and you can realize, I will not live in this repression, this I will no longer collaborate with my own repression. That's the breakthrough. And what needs to happen next is the transformation. And so look to Psyche, sextile, Lilith, sextile, the sun at the time of this full moon, and say, am I ready for this maiden to woman initiation, to integrate this power, to learn how to walk with it and live with it, to have support as I activate the creative imagination and the new state of consciousness that I am being invited to embody. And it could be both. There is the Juno initiation, the woman, the cycle into the sacred marriage, the sacred sexuality, the womb wisdom that allows you to remember, that allows you to step into your power and take a place of leadership as we are bringing this new consciousness and this new value system. It's not new, it's ancient, but we are needing to bring it into the world in a new way, whatever the cost. We need women who are Junos, who are ready and available and trained and initiated so that they can take the Psyches and the Liliths under their own wing and create the circles of healing. And that is where the claiming of that which we have disowned, that lie and delusion which we have believed, that's where it happens. It happens personally and individually inside of us with support. We cannot do it alone. And it happens in our circles of women, and we also need the men supporting and standing by and standing with, and also recognizing that the world cannot go on with the masculine under the delusion that they are more powerful and more important and better than female, because that cost to them is killing them and the earth. And they also get to be truly divine masculine when they can come in right relationship and partnership with the empowered, initiated, awakened feminine. So this is the work that is before us now. And this moon in Cancer, this Lilith asteroid, Mercury in Cancer, Mercury is going back and forth between Psyche, and he is the messenger. He is carrying this message, and it is happening now at the full moon as the moon is rising as we speak here on the East Coast. So that's what I have for you at this full moon reading. And I'm going to put a link in the comments for you to book a session to talk with me about initiation. If you are feeling stirred in your womb, in your yoni, in your heart, in your body, by what I am saying to you, if you know that you want more than a breakthrough and you are ready for transformation and you want the support, you desire the initiation. I remember when I first heard of initiation 22 years ago, it was so much yes. So let me know that this resounds with you, and I will put the link in. It will take me a little while because everything has to get processed. But sometime this evening, I'll put that link in where you can book the conversation if you are ready to inquire about a private initiation, working with your Lilith energy, your Psyche energy, your Juno energy, and step into your womb power. Blessed full moon, everyone. Thank you for joining me.